Thank you, Deputy President. The Animal Justice Party supports the disallowance motion of Game and Feral Animal Control Amendment, Native Game Birds Regulation 2015, brought to the House by Mr Shoebridge. I've actually attended, even though I understand clearly that this is shooting animals that are apparently supposed to be stationary, but I actually have been a duck rescuer in my past when there was duck shooting out on the fields before the bill and Act was brought to ban recreational duck shooting. There was one very significant aspect to that, and even though we clearly oppose the killing of these animals for this purpose, what I would see and what all the rescuers would see is that when shots were taken at a flock of birds, you would see maybe one or two that would drop, probably killed instantly if it's lucky. But a very high percentage of them, as you watch the birds fly across the lake, there will be several, 2 or 3 or 4, that slowly drop away from the flock. And they are the birds that die a long, lingering death from shot pellets that are in parts of their body. One of the studies that actually brought this House, or the decision of both houses, to ban recreational duck shooting was a study by Robert L. Cochrane called Crippling Effects of Lead, Steel and Copper Shot on Experimental Mallards. And this strikes at the very issue here, and that is that when research was done by the gun industry actually into shooting of ducks, one of the studies was actually shooting ducks that were tethered on the ground and were not flying. And so this actually replicates to an extent what this amendment is about in trying to allow shooters to shoot animals that are actually still and on the ground or just moving slowly and on the ground while they're eating. So the study was actually performed by Winchester Western, which involved controlled, where ducks were tethered and not in flight, and it measured the spray pattern and the injuries inflicted by the shots. The study proved that a duck's fate is determined by the number of pellets and what vital organs they struck. Ducks were hit in the abdomen, and those with broken legs and bones, whilst not immediately die, may have little chance of survival, and these ducks are a part of the unretrieved, killed or crippled control cohort. This was a study done on animals that were on the ground and moving slowly. In the Animal Welfare Advisory Council's report to advise the government on this very issue, the Honourable Jan Burnswoods from the Labor Party, who quoted the Animal Welfare Advisory Council's report, which went to this very subject, quoted their report. One major issue that has been under discussion is cruelty, and in 1988 the Animal Welfare Advisory Council, which was set up by the Labor government, reported that duck shooting should be terminated because the level of pain and suffering of the ducks was unreasonably high. The Advisory Council recommended that the season be brought to an end, particularly as it is estimated that as many as 20% of birds that are shot, die a long, lingering death. And there is the rub of what this issue is about. It is not an issue about controlling numbers of birds that might be putting pressure on the success or not of the amount of grain growing in rice paddocks. If there is going to be a system that's going to deter birds from eating these crops, the government must invest money and resources into researching ways of deterring these ducks from coming to the area in the numbers that they might be. And maybe just also having to take into account that in order to prevent unacceptable levels of unreasonable, unjustifiable and unnecessary suffering, these are the measures within the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, that we cannot be having an impact on animals which is bringing about unreasonable, unjustifiable and unnecessary suffering. We need to be, as a humane society, turning our mind and putting resources into alternative ways to deter animals if there is a competition in agriculture and animals. So, to be going down this way of opening up another chapter of shooting, maiming, crippling and causing long, lingering deaths of many, many, many animals, that is something which we will look back to in the future with shame, and we will be judged by that. So I commend the disallowance motion to the House.